On our 15th anniversary, she sat across from me at a candlelit table and confessed she'd been unfaithful for 2 years, as if it were merely switching phone providers. Calmly, as though rehearsed, she informed me that she was departing, her choice already made. She claimed to have wished only to inform me directly. In the background, the restaurant bustled with the sound of silverware clinking, jazz from speakers in a corner, and nearby laughter from a couple on their phones. Unbeknownst to everyone, our 15 years of marriage were collapsing at Table 7 of Josephine, an upscale Nashville eatery nestled on Rutledge Hill, where we'd shared our first serious date. She had deliberately chosen that spot, I now realize. The most significant change was my lack of tears. I didn't shout or clutch the table imploring her to reconsider. Instead, I smiled, raised my glass of Bordeaux, and offered it to her. "Then I wish you nothing but happiness, Fiona," I said. Her expression in that instant, the puzzlement, the breach in the fortitude she had carefully maintained for weeks, perhaps months. That moment will stay with me forever. But what followed, when the door of Josephine opened 40 minutes later and someone entered whom Fiona never anticipated, that's when her world crumbled. And it was all self-inflicted. My name is Declan Marsh. I am 45 years old. For nearly 2 decades, I have worked as a private investigator and security consultant in Nashville, Tennessee. I have assisted corporations in recovering stolen assets, built cases for lawyers, and helped people uncover truths they both yearned to discover and dreaded to verify. As a professional truth seeker, the deception within my own marriage persistently haunts me daily. Since the detective who uncovered others' deceit was oblivious to his wife's for 15 years, you can imagine my predicament. Newcomers, consider subscribing to this channel and share your thoughts on whether you foresaw this outcome. Trust me, it's unexpected. If this narrative resonates with you personally, like this video, it assists others in finding our content. Before diving into the specifics of that fateful night, I wish to discuss my career as a private investigator. Over 2 decades, I've forged a unique bond with reality. Truth is seldom as sensational as popularly believed. Now, let me share my story entirely. The realization doesn't strike suddenly like an explosion. It builds up. It comes in pieces, in seemingly insignificant details that appear harmless on their own but prove destructive when combined. An unusual credit card charge, a new soap brand in the guest bathroom, the subtle pause before answering a question so simple it shouldn't warrant a pause at all. You learn to discern patterns. You learn to store observations without immediately attributing meaning to them, as early interpretations distort everything that comes next. You learn an unsettling form of patience. And the most crucial lesson is learned. People who conceal something are always more conspicuous than they think. I knew all this. I had known it for 2 decades in my professional life. Yet it still happened to me. This is the point I want you to remember as I recount this tale, not as a story about betrayal, although that's part of it. The tale isn't about revenge, although others might label it as such, and I no longer correct them. Instead, I want you to grasp it as a narrative highlighting the price of overlooking something that, on some level, you already perceive. That's the true essence. The tale begins well before a restaurant on Rutledge Hill. In the summer of 2008, I encountered Fiona Gallagher at a charity event for Hands on Nashville, one of those volunteer coordination organizations that truly make a difference in the city. I was there with a coworker. She was there with her sister, Rosalind, who managed a small nonprofit based in East Nashville. Fiona was 30 at the time, sporting dark red hair that fell just below her jaw, eyes green as emeralds that seemed to capture light from across the room and subconsciously make you feel that she was privy to something you hadn't yet deciphered. She worked in pharmaceutical sales, traveled extensively, and possessed an uncanny ability to read people. This latter talent, I would later learn, was not accidental. For 14 months, I courted her before popping the question at Centennial Park, near the replica of the Parthenon on a tranquil Sunday morning when the park was scarcely populated. She affirmed my proposal before I could complete the sentence. Our wedding took place at the Hermitage Hotel in the city center, with 64 attendees. Her parents traveled from Knoxville, while my brother Garrett and his kids drove down from Louisville. Rosalind delivered a toast that moved many to tears. During our first decade together, I can confidently assert we were good, not flawless, as no one is perfect but strong. We owned a home in the Sylvan Park neighborhood, a 3-bedroom craftsman on a leafy street where we knew our neighbors and frequented a coffee shop 2 blocks away every Saturday morning. We chose not to have children, a decision we discussed early and repeatedly, ultimately concluding it was not our path. Our life was less raucous, more deliberate, filled with lengthy dinners, travels, and work that meant something to both of us. Occasionally, I yearned for assignments, spending prolonged periods away from home, predominantly when corporate clients demanded on-site security evaluations in different urban areas. Similarly, Fiona would travel for her pharmaceutical territory that encompassed Tennessee, northern Georgia, and the western Kentucky border. We were often absent, and we had grown accustomed to this pattern as the beat of our marriage. I believe it was this regularity that made it effortless for her to conceal. The initial indications were subtle enough that I nearly dismissed them as unremarkable. Approximately 2 years ago, during the fall, Fiona returned from her commercial excursions more reserved than typical. It wasn't about being down or withdrawn. Rather, she seemed to be harboring something secretively, as though there was an undisclosed matter she hadn't confided in me yet. I inquired about her well-being roughly 3 weeks after noticing the change, and she assured me she was merely fatigued. The quarter had been particularly challenging, she added, with management imposing demanding targets. For 2 years, I concealed the truth while filling in for a colleague on medical leave. Later, I would confirm all my actions were valid. However, these facts were not the whole story. I feel compelled to be truthful about something. I'm a private investigator, and yet for years I overlooked what was right before my eyes. This realization haunts me like an ingrained splinter I can't entirely remove, but I have spent enough time contemplating it to understand why. One doesn't perform covert surveillance on loved ones, or so it should be. The abilities I employ at work were utilized unknowingly for those who already suspected something amiss. I never allowed myself to suspect Fiona. My trust in her was not naive, it was deliberate. It was the foundation that made our marriage a union and not a supervised relationship. But trust can be manipulated by someone aware of its extent. The second indication emerged in January of the subsequent year. Each month, as part of my financial routine, I scrutinized our joint credit card statement. This time, an intriguing observation caught my eye: 2 charges at the Hilton Garden Inn in Murfreesboro, specifically on Old Fort Parkway, from November. Yet we hadn't embarked on a trip together that month. The details of November were vivid in my mind. I was in Atlanta for a corporate security audit for most of the time. I almost questioned Fiona about these charges. The question hovered at the edge of my tongue one morning over coffee, but she received a call from her doctor's office regarding prescription renewal, and the moment slipped away. I reassured myself there must be an innocent explanation since she often stayed overnight for early appointments in Murfreesboro, knowing this from years past. I let it go, moved on. That was likely the last chance to alter the outcome of our story. Our 15th anniversary fell on a Thursday in March. Fiona arranged our table at Josephine, a place significant to us after our first genuine date. A week prior, she checked if the night was set aside for me, sending a small blue heart emoji. This gesture is typically indicative of joy or habitual actions during a performance. I donned the charcoal suit Fiona had gifted me on my birthday 2 years back. Arriving early, I ordered sparkling water and waited. Fiona looked stunning upon arrival, her beauty something we've always acknowledged. The meal consisted of casual topics: Fiona's successful quarterly review, and a case I'd resolved involving a missing business document incident for a company in Brentwood. She inquired about my brother Garrett, while I brought up Rosalind's recent relocation from East Nashville to an apartment in Germantown. Our meal was served, eaten, and discussed. In the interval between our main course and dessert, Fiona paused, fixed her gaze on me, and started, "Declan, there's something I need to tell you, and I want you to listen without interruption first." The ambience at that instant, the glow of the candle illuminating her earrings, the softening of the restaurant noise, all seemed heightened. My senses seemed to anticipate a revelation before my mind could process it. "I've been involved with someone else for 2 years, she disclosed. "I won't sugarcoat it or claim ignorance. I made a conscious decision, repeated it, and now I believe we both deserve honesty about our current situation." She went on to share certain details. Some she chose to reveal, others she chose to keep private. She presented her interpretation of our marriage. "We had grown distant. You were often absent." She felt unacknowledged. She felt overlooked. Her narrative was well structured and likely took her a considerable amount of time to assemble. I paid attention, allowed her to conclude, and maintained a composed expression, a habit honed over years in similar situations, as the instant you respond is the instant you cease learning. Upon her conclusion, she looked at me for a response she had prepared. And I raised my glass. "Fiona," I said, "I appreciate your frankness sincerely." She was taken aback. "Is that all?" What were you expecting? I replied. I'm not sure, not this. She appeared somewhat agitated. Aren't you going to ask who it is? I responded. No, I don't think it's necessary. The perplexity on her face was an unexpected source of pleasure for me. She had prepared responses for sorrow, rage, and supplication, but not this. For a moment, we remained in this interlude. She signaled for the bill. I said I intended to have dessert. Glance returned to me as if I were carrying out an unfathomable act. This is when Josephine's door swung open. I must rewind. The event at the restaurant on that night wasn't initiated there. It started 6 weeks prior in my office on Charlotte Avenue. There, I finally permitted myself to scrutinize something I should have examined long ago, the credit card statement, not from January, but a more current one. A charge for a hotel in Clarksville was visible 2 nights. Fiona had informed me she was visiting a college friend that weekend. I recalled nodding. I recalled making other arrangements with an old coworker instead. After I spotted the charge, I remained seated at my desk for a considerable period. Then, as usual, I got to work. Within 4 days, I had an image I couldn't erase from my mind. The man's name was Bryce Calloway. 39-year-old man, divorced, held the position of regional sales director for a pharmaceutical distribution company headquartered in Memphis, regularly conducting business in Nashville and throughout Middle Tennessee. He likely encountered Fiona at an industry event. Their interactions were professional, eliminating the need for inventive stories. Her professional life supplied adequate cover. I traced his profile via professional contacts. I obtained supplementary information using investigative resources. I could have commissioned another individual to delve deeper, but I opted out. This wasn't a case to be solved. It was my marriage. There is a boundary I adhere to, even in my own life, between discovering essential facts and compiling a comprehensive file on one's spouse. The information I had was sufficient. I knew he existed. I knew approximately how long the situation had persisted. For 2 years, I was aware that the self Fiona had been crafting in secrecy excluded me from her design. Furthermore, I discovered through a colleague at the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, with whom I collaborated on a white-collar case 2 years ago, that Bryce Calloway was under federal civil fraud investigation. His firm was accused of submitting fraudulent distribution contracts to hospital networks in 3 different states. The FBI's Memphis office had launched an official investigation 8 months earlier, which was still confidential at the time. I believed Fiona remained unaware of this. As for my actions, let me clarify what I did and didn't do because this narrative is not about vengeance. I want to emphasize that. I took action due to having to choose between 2 paths, either discreetly leaving my marriage or allowing an event, destined to occur regardless, to become a lasting memory for Fiona. I reached out to Rosalind. For 15 years, Rosalind Gallagher Moore has been a consistent presence in my life. Our bond, unusual among in-laws, was forged on genuine warmth and reciprocal respect rather than duty. She remembered my birthday without prompting, called twice during a challenging phase of a case out of concern because Fiona mentioned I seemed distressed. When Fiona and I traveled, it was Rosalind who looked after our plants and collected the mail without being asked. She is one of those individuals who serve as anchors, maintaining the structure of families or friendships not through spectacular acts, but through steady presence and the kind of awareness that makes people feel understood. For some time in my life, I've come across individuals like him scarcely. I ran into her at Barista Parlor on 8th Avenue about fortnight before the anniversary dinner. I shared with her what I was aware of. Her face shifted from disbelief to anger and later to a state sadder and more enduring. "For how long have you known?" she inquired. "Long enough," I replied. "I must inform you before it concludes and I need to ask you something." Rosalind was already informed about Bryce Calloway prior to me for approximately 6 months. Fiona had disclosed this information to her, trusting sisterhood to keep the secret. Rosalind detested it. She resisted, imploring Fiona to terminate it or reveal it to me. Threatening twice to expose the truth herself, she held back due to not wanting to be the one to shatter my life. Upon hearing about the federal investigation, she remained silent for quite a while. "She is unaware," I said. "No," Rosalind confirmed. "She most definitely doesn't know." "I won't use it against her," I cautiously stated. "However, someone who cares for her should inform her, and I believe the moment for that is now, given she's about to be with a man facing significant federal repercussions." "When?" Rosalind inquired. "I mentioned the anniversary dinner, the time and location, and I asked if she would attend. She did." We returned to table 7 at Josephine. The door swung open at 8:47 p.m. Rosalind entered, donning a coat she'd bought for this very purpose, as she shared later, to feel protected for the encounter. She'd contacted the hostess earlier. She was aware of our location. When Fiona noticed her sister approaching our table, she froze in disbelief, unable to quickly grasp what was transpiring. "Rosalind, why are you here?" Rosalind took the empty seat at our table without being invited. She gazed at me, and an unspoken understanding, tranquil, sorrowful, complete, seemed to transpire. Then she fixated on her sister. "I adore you, Fiona," she declared. "You're my sibling, and I cherish you. Over the past 6 months, I've hidden a truth that was gradually transforming me into someone I don't wish to be." "Shouldn't we stop?" questioned Fiona. "Bryce Calloway's business is under federal investigation for fraud," Rosalind clarified. "The FBI Memphis division. 8 months ago, they initiated a probe. He's been falsifying contracts in multiple states. It hasn't become public knowledge yet, but it will, and when it does, everyone associated with him will face scrutiny." A pallor enveloped Fiona's complexion gradually. I witnessed the change unfold. "He's not who you believe him to be," Rosalind continued her explanation. "I have been urging you for months to sever ties. I should have voiced this earlier. I should have spoken up to both of us instead of attempting to shield everyone from everything. I am no longer willing to protect something that shouldn't be protected." Fiona looked at me. She seemed puzzled by any emotions she thought she'd see on my face. I maintained composure. "Was this your doing?" she queried. "I informed your sister of the truth," I responded. She decided how to act upon that information. "Declan, you mentioned departing," I stated. "I'm not trying to hinder you nor wish to harm you, but you ought to understand your destination, Fiona." "That's merely fair." The restaurant bustled around us, jazz melodies playing in the corner, cutlery clinking, a nearby couple with their own night unrelated to ours. Fiona held her wine glass, put it back without taking a sip. She looked at her sister, then at me, and finally at the table, staying in that position for an extended period. I wish to elaborate on the drive home from Josephine that night, as it's significant. I stayed parked in the Rutledge Hill garage for approximately 20 minutes following our departure from the restaurant. I didn't weep. I didn't call anyone. I sat in the gloom, allowing the night to seep into me as chilliness gradually fills an unheated room after an all-night open window. It isn't a sudden sensation. It's gradual, a temperature drop, a chilly breeze reaching you from increasingly distant corners until the entire space feels altered. 17 years is a vast stretch. Regardless of 6 weeks' foreknowledge that it would end, regardless of mental preparation for what was approaching, the reality of its termination struck differently than its premonition. Fiona spoke her words, Rosalind voiced hers, and Bryce Calloway's name lay between us as an item. Now I found myself seated in a downtown Nashville parking garage at 9 p.m. on a Thursday, and my marriage was dissolved. Pondering over the artisans on the Treeland Street in Sylvan Park, I wondered if the hydrangeas I'd planted along the fence that spring would flourish, and who would be there to appreciate them if they did. My thoughts drifted to the coffee shop 2 blocks away and the particular table by the window where Fiona and I had spent countless Saturday mornings, engrossed in separate books, exchanging newspaper sections, barely conversing. I questioned whether I was truly content in that place or merely comfortable, and if I'd ever truly comprehended the distinction. Subsequently, I started the car and headed home, forcing myself to eat as one does. One must perform daily tasks. Keep the engine of life running because it offers a place for your hands while your mind deciphers what comes next. There exists a narrative in which I am the protagonist, the wronged husband who outsmarted the woman who deceived him, the detective who pierced the deception, the individual who departed from 15 years with his head held high and his honor untarnished. I find that account somewhat questionable, as it fails to depict the reality of the subsequent months after that dinner. The divorce papers were filed in April and finalized by October. Both parties sought legal representation, and the proceedings followed their usual course, exhaustive, draining, and at times distressing, as is common with the closure of long-lasting relationships. Our shared residence in Sylvan Park was divided between us. I remained in Nashville while she temporarily moved to her parents' house in Knoxville, later shifting to a rental property in Midtown Nashville, conveniently located near her workplace. The situation of Bryce Calloway became public knowledge 4 months after our anniversary dinner in June. The media coverage was extensive. His company entered into a federal consent agreement. He faced civil litigation and court supervision, and his career in pharmaceutical distribution came to an end. I'm unsure about the relationship between Fiona and Bryce at that juncture, but I don't pry. Rosalind and I continue to communicate, albeit less frequently, and our interactions have changed. She harbors guilt, while I feel gratitude, and these feelings often clash. However, she is a decent person who found herself in an untenable situation, and I trust she made the best decisions possible, even if one of them was delayed by 6 months. In the spring, my brother Garrett visited from Louisville and stayed for a weekend. We journeyed to Natchez Trace Parkway, discussing various topics along Life's Fork End Trail, as brothers often do. He didn't offer solutions, he simply appeared. This meant more than he realizes. The artisan on the Treeland Street in Sylvan Park sold their property in July. I shifted residence to an apartment in the vicinity of the country, situated near my workplace on Charlotte Avenue, occupying the 4th level of a building affording a view of the eastern skyline during morning coffee preparation. It is peaceful and solitary. At times it instills a sense of liberation, while at others mere tranquility. Reflecting on the inquiry I often encounter upon narrating this tale, there's curiosity. Was I furious? Indeed, I was seething with anger. Not in an explosive manner. Rather, a frosty, gradual anger that permeated my very being and took years to fully manifest. This anger stemmed not only from the betrayal itself, but also the prolonged deception, the meticulous preservation of an illusion, the exertion expended on constructing another life while moving through the rooms of the previous one as if nothing amiss. I was angry that our abode in Sylvan Park, a place I truly cherished, transformed into something I could no longer recognize. The Hermitage Hotel, where our wedding took place, is merely a structure I drive past now. The coffee shop on the Treeline Street, our Saturday ritual spot, I still steer clear of over 2 years later because I'm not yet prepared for the emotions I'd encounter stepping inside. I want to emphasize, it's acceptable to feel anger. This text is for those experiencing something akin in their lives. A calm facade does not dictate your healing progress. You are entitled to your fury, you are entitled to mourn. Both can coexist. However, the key point I hold on to is that I did not let my anger define me. I could have exposed Bryce Calloway, humiliating Fiona publicly, or orchestrated more than a discreet dinner with her sister. Given my professional abilities and connections, I could have made life challenging for anyone I chose to target. But I didn't. Although Fiona didn't harm me, she did, but I am not one who seeks revenge by destroying people. Instead, I expose the truth and let it take its course. If you find yourself in a marriage with a fissure unchecked or are dealing with the wreckage of something that shattered your life, consider this. The most treacherous form of self-deception is disguised as loyalty. I convinced myself I trusted Fiona. Yes, I did trust her. However, when I saw the hotel charge in January, I told myself there was a simple explanation. But there wasn't. There was a complex one I wasn't prepared to face. I opted not to see it because acknowledging it felt like a betrayal of the trust I had chosen to bestow. Now I comprehend that trusting someone is distinct from refusing to recognize them honestly. One can care deeply about someone and yet be able to scrutinize them genuinely, focusing on their actions, the chasm between your expectations of them and their displayed reality. For 2 decades, I helped others learn to observe their surroundings truthfully. It wasn't until I reached 45, seated at Josephine's on a Thursday in March, that I understood the necessity of self-examination. I'm still learning this skill. Some days I feel I'm making progress. Other days, I drive past Sylvan Park's exit, and I sense a 15-year burden lodged within me, which I let slip away as I continue driving. That's the learning process. It's the only aspect of life that truly matters once everything else has been removed. Half a year post-divorce, I was back in my Charlotte Avenue office, reevaluating security measures for a hotel group in the Gulch, when an unfamiliar number called. I responded due to a long-standing professional practice. The person was Patricia, a friend of Rosalind's who had been influenced by Rosalind's tale enough to question me. She found herself in a situation she couldn't comprehend with her husband, and she had ignored an intuitive feeling for too long. She wanted to know if it was incorrect to scrutinize what lay before her more carefully. I replied negatively. Examining one's life isn't wrong. We conversed for approximately 40 minutes. I didn't bill her. I provided the same advice I give anyone who sits opposite me and expresses uncertainty about their circumstances. Begin with the facts, not with apprehensions, assumptions, or desired beliefs. What is known as a fact? What are the details at hand? then pursue those facts. Approach with sensitivity, candor, and an open mind, ready for whatever awaits discovery. Since unveiling reality, even when it causes distress, is preferable to dwelling within a false, comforting facade. This was what Patricia undertook, and she discovered what she had suspected. Unlike my own marriage, her ending was marked by more tumult, more discord, and the added complexities of children. Yet she learned the truth and acted upon it. 6 months later, she emailed me to confirm she was coping. Not elated, not healed completely, but surviving. Stepping forward armed with knowledge. That message meant more to me than many events from the past 2 years. I am 45, residing on the 4th floor of an apartment in the nation, brewing coffee each morning while gazing at the Nashville skyline. I engage in work that resonates with me. I have my brother. Some friendships endured through hardship, while others proved unfounded, offering valuable insights. I am unaware of Fiona's current life. I consciously chose not to be informed about it. She is presumably shaping her future in this city, a matter between her, her moral compass, and the person she has evolved into since that Thursday in March. My knowledge is confined to what transpired at Table 7 in Josephine's. I know that I toasted a woman who meticulously destroyed our marriage over 2 years, and my sentiments were sincere when I expressed a desire for her happiness. This wasn't out of anger or lack of pain, but because the opposite would have been to leave bitterness as my final gift to her, and she had already endured enough. I lifted my glass, offered my well wishes, and moved on. As Rosalind stepped through the door and truth was set between us, I didn't orchestrate that instance as retribution. Instead, I contrived it as honesty, something I should have been granted 2 years prior, yet wasn't. While some things can be managed, others are entrusted to the truth. In my personal encounters, the truth eventually takes care of business. To be frank with you, what lingers isn't Fiona's actions, but rather the January morning I saw that hotel bill and convinced myself there was a straightforward reason behind it. That instant, that's when it happened. We don't lose individuals abruptly. We lose them in the subtle moments when we elect comfort over clarity. If you find yourself in a specific spot right now, pondering an uneasy sensation you keep dismissing, stop yourself from rationalizing. You've already recognized it. You've known for some time. The issue is whether you're prepared to see.